Cherry Creek Bigfoot encounter near Oxford Peak. Klein, Joseph, Son, and Brian Belknap had an encounter with Sasquatch not far from Cherry Creek area in the mountains of Caribou Forest in 1980. They were prospecting the area for gold, and their horses were acting uncomfortable and skittish. Then they heard an eerie, non-human scream. They noticed some logs in the area were shredded, as if a bear had been in the area grubbing through them. At the draw of where the tore-up logs were, the horses did not want to continue. The men continued anyway. A short distance away, they set up a sluice, then began to sluice and pan for gold. Belknap saw something for a moment on the mountain that spooked both of the men. They thought it may have been a bear. They decided to clean up and leave the area. They loaded the horses, and as they crossed the creek, Klein saw a Bigfoot approach them. The Bigfoot had sticker burrs stuck in its hair, and something red smeared across its face that Klein thinks could have been berries or maybe even blood. It kept walking towards the men and horses. The men were in shock. When it got within 20 feet of Klein, he said he could smell the creature and could tell his horse was smelling it too. A putrid odor. The horse started to lunge away. Klein yelled to Belknap, "We gotta get out of here." This area has some history of Bigfoot sightings and encounters. Around 10 miles or so southwest of your 2010 sighting, some motorists almost hit a giant Bigfoot crossing Highway 30 back in 1977, when it was just a narrow 2-lane road close to Riverside. Some folks sent me a report and photos of Bigfoot tracks around 10 miles east of your sighting in the mountain farm community of Oxford, Idaho. A lot of folks toss out half-ate meals and drinks when they stop at rest stops, and so I'm sure the trash cans and dumpsters have tons of stuff to eat that may attract animals and possibly Bigfoot to come to forage through them if they can. I checked out the Cherry Creek rest stop south of Malad, where the nearby town has had some Bigfoot sightings, and the man sleeping at the rest stop was awakened by a wood knock and something in the woods. I noticed a canyon draw on the mountain, and it has a creek and a wash that both lead directly to that rest stop from the woods and directly to a dumpster behind the rest stop, perhaps a foraging place for Bigfoot on some nights. I also checked out the Malad Summit rest stop near your sighting, where the guy saw a 9-foot-tall Bigfoot foraging through the dumpster. This area is prime Bigfoot habitat, thick alpine woods behind the rest stop that goes on forever to the mountaintops and canyons on the west side. It would be easy for the creature to come in close to the dumpster at night and forage on occasion. On June 17, 2017, a traveler sleeping at the rest stop near Malad City awakened by possible wood knocks. This is what the witness reported to BFRO, report number 57784. The witness writes, "While traveling from Harriman, Utah to Rexburg, Idaho, I stopped for the night at the Cherry Creek rest stop off of I-15 just before Malad, Idaho. I parked in the truck area as close to the mountain and as far from the restrooms as I could. I fell asleep in my pickup camper shell approximately 10 p.m. At 11 p.m., something woke me up. I sat up and looked around and saw nothing out of order. I could see very well due to the rest stop lights. I saw one big rig parked in the truck area and no cars at all. The truck may have awakened me when it pulled up. I laid back down, and a few minutes later, I heard brush breaking a couple of 100 yards up the hill. I thought it must be a bear or an elk. Ignoring the breaking brush, I tried to go back to sleep. Then, while still awake, I heard a clear, distinctive wood knock. Very clear, like a bat on an oak tree. I listened for another half hour or so and heard occasional brush breaking. I then fell asleep. I was then awakened approximately 3 a.m. by breaking brush that sounded much closer than before, followed by one clear knock from uphill, and north of me 10 seconds or so later, another clear knock further up the hill, but to the south. 2 separate locations. I got up a little freaked out and drove north to Malad, Idaho. There was a follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Kevin Lelewan. I talked to the witness by phone. He was sleeping under his pickup canopy with the windows open. At 11 p.m., when he first heard brush breaking, he thought it was a large animal such as an elk making crunching sounds as it walked. The knock was very clear and sounded like a bat hitting a telephone pole or tree. At around 3 a.m., he heard brush breaking and a single wood knock in 2 different directions. He thought one was maybe 150 yards away. He said, "I thought about it too much for 15 minutes and then left." He did not hear any vocalizations. The witness is not aware of any caves nearby, but there is a huge rim rock above the steep mountain. This area is on the edge of the Caribou National Forest. There is farmland on the west side of I-15. The witness does not know of any orchards, just different crops. The witness is an avid hunter and spends much time in the outdoors. 30 years earlier, he heard two wood knocks early in the morning that sounded the same as in the report. I found him very credible. Devil's Creek Bigfoot appeared injured above Marsh Valley, heading up Malad Summit. Kevin writes RMSO. I witnessed a juvenile for probably 30 to 40 seconds or longer right off the side of the highway. I slowed down to its speed and drove alongside it as it walked straight ahead. There was no other traffic on the highway at the time, and it didn't seem bothered at all. It did seem like maybe its right arm or shoulder possibly had been injured from the side I was looking at it from. Also, I read one of your episodes of a Bigfoot in Garland. I was a paramedic and I heard the story going over the pager or scanner, and I know a lot about that situation. And the person I work with found 2 full sets of tracks that next morning at his dairy bar approximately 6 miles away from the Garland area. RMSO asks, when did your sighting happen and where were you when you saw it on the highway? Kevin continues, my sighting was near the North Utah and South Idaho border in 2010 sometime around May. I was southbound Interstate 15 about to climb Malad Pass about 2 miles before the rest stop. It was early morning and visibility was great. The 2-lane highway is split between northbound and southbound by a concrete divider and maybe 100 feet of sagebrush and grass. I don't remember any traffic northbound or coming down the pass, and only one semi southbound a distance behind me. I was maybe 1 mile from starting my ascent up the pass, driving a Ford F-350 pulling a 20-foot construction trailer. My construction foreman was in the passenger seat. I noticed something or someone walking up the side of the road on my right side or passenger side. At that moment, I thought it was a hitchhiker, or maybe someone broke down, so I changed lanes looking in the mirror and noticed a semi that was about a half a mile behind us. As we got closer, I noticed what I thought was a monkey or a gorilla walking right on the fog line, looking straight ahead and slightly down. I started to slow down and noticed the walking gait was 1 foot in front of the other like it was walking a tightrope. It looked like it was about 4.5 feet between each step. I also noticed when its feet came up, the bottom of the feet were gray-black. The rest of it was covered in reddish-brown hair. Its hands were dark battleship gray color, and its fingernails were black. Its left arm swayed in stride, hanging down somewhere close to its knees, and its right arm swaying, but wasn't in the same stride, like possibly the right arm or shoulder was injured. By that time, I had slowed down to its walking speed and was directly to the side of it, still trying to figure out what in the hell I was looking at. My passenger turned sideways in his seat and was facing it, looking straight out the window of the passenger side and started to block my view. I was hoping to get a better view of the face, so I sped up just a little bit so I could see through my mirror to see its face, and really didn't get very good details. I noticed the hair was reddish-brown color, but the hair that was hanging off its arms and some other areas as the sun was shining through, it looked more like a strawberry red. Its facial color was the same as its hands, a battleship gray maybe, and the hair came around most of its facial area. The creature looked straight ahead and slightly down. It looked directly in front of itself and never once turned or looked at us, even though we were 20 feet away with a noisy power stroke diesel next to it. The semi was starting to get closer, so I pulled ahead and got back in the slow lane and was watching it through my mirror, still wondering if I was seeing things. When the semi got there, I got confirmation because I heard him start shutting it down. It was obvious he had seen the same thing we did. My foreman and I never said a thing to each other. We were both in shock and we had no idea what we had just seen. About the time we were in Malad, he looked at me and asked me if I had just seen what he seen. We agreed that we seen the same thing and agreed on some details, and we never talked about it again, thinking everybody would say we were crazy, and even more crazy that we seen it on the side of the freeway. I had to know what I seen, and I started to investigate, And I just Googled Bigfoot on freeways, always thinking they were the hide and seek champion, and there was no way they would be out in the open. To my surprise, I found many cases of reports of Sasquatch and Bigfoot on the side of the road, as well as videos. Still never telling anybody. My foreman and I were traveling on that same road maybe a year later, and the only thing we said is, "Do you remember what we seen on the road right here?" That was the end of the conversation. It was like we were still in shock. To describe it better, from behind it had a very smooth walking gait. Its calf muscles looked like softballs. The total weight of the creature I would estimate to be around 220 pounds, and it was high level with me sitting in my truck. I would guess its height around 6 feet or taller. The hair was uniform and looked groomed, and I would guess it to be around 4 inches long, and maybe some of the hair that hung from its arms around its neck were around 6 inches long, and that hair looked more strawberry color than the main body color, which was reddish brown. It never opened its mouth. It was focused on where it was walking. It's like it had no idea that we were there. I know this sounds crazy and far-fetched, but it's 100% truth. I found a report of a traveler hearing a wood knock at the Cherry Creek rest stop south of Malad. Last year, a man spotted a 9-foot tall Sasquatch foraging in the dumpster behind the Malad Summit rest stop. I knew him through a relative, so I was able to confirm the sighting. He saw the big guy at the dumpster, which is around the rear of the rest stop by a patch of trees. He claimed it to be dark brown, around 9 feet tall, and going through the dumpster. I believe his story. He had no reason to fabricate his story. There are other videos and witnesses that have seen Sasquatch in the Cherry Creek area, which is within about 5 miles of my sighting. The craziest thing of all is we had 2 digital cameras in the center compartment and 2 iPhones and never once thought of taking a picture. RMSO responds, well, one of the reasons you guys may have saw that Bigfoot is it was probably injured and not at the top of its game. It was concentrating on getting from point A to point B, possibly in pain, and did not care if someone saw it. Also, if it was around 6 feet tall, it was more than likely a teenager, a juvenile Bigfoot, and they're not as careful as the giants that make this creature famous.